The Israeli army says at least 230 hostages are being held captive by Hamas. The U.S. State Department says 10 Americans are still unaccounted for. Over 20 of the hostages are children. As many as 20 of them are over the age of 60. The majority of the hostages are believed to still be alive. Joining me now is Yudi Gorin. His cousin is one of those hostages held by Hamas in Gaza for the past 3 weeks. Yudi, thank you for coming on. Your cousin Tal was kidnapped during that terrible day of attack by Hamas. What is the latest you have about his whereabouts?
First of all, Reverend Sharpton, thank you for giving me the stage to speak on this, and thank you for keeping this topic alive, because we all think this should be the top priority for Israel and for its allies to consider. Sadly, I really have nothing new to tell you that has changed in the past 3 weeks. There hasn't been a visit of the Red Cross. We don't know where he is. We don't know how he is. We don't know his condition. We really know nothing new about him.
Now, I was moved by talking last week to some of a relative of one of the hostages, and said that their relative was not political. They weren't in none of the sides. I was outraged at what happened in Israel. I'm outraged on civilians in Gaza being hurt. I think it's a moral question. And I'm outraged that people that are civilian and innocent are being hostages. You can't have morality for one side and not for the other. Tell us briefly a bit about him, your cousin. I know the two of you were born 3 months apart. What is he like, and how close are the two of you, and what type of person was he?
Well, I hope, first of all, I hope we can still speak about them in present tense.
Right.
And he's a very, I would say, kind of a shy person. He is a civil engineer. He was born and raised in the kibbutz from which he was kidnapped. He works outside of the kibbutz right now, but he went kind of through the regular, life routine of an Israeli person, serving and going to high school, serving in the military, went to university. He works outside of his kibbutz. You can see his family right now. He's a great family man. All of my mother's family live in that kibbutz, and he is one of them. So they're this tightly knit clan. He is an excellent grandson and son, and he made sure to visit his grandparents as often as possible, and he's just an ordinary guy. That's really all I can say. He's a stand-up guy. He's not political. If anything, my entire family are more left-leaning. We're pro-resolution. They have no beef with Gaza. They've never said any comments against Gazan civilians, even though they are constantly attacked by Gazan missiles launched by Hamas. They're the first line. And, it became their routine. And yet they have no grudges against the people of Gaza. And I think that's the tragedy of both sides. And you said it exactly right, that civilians are paying the price of bad decisions that our governments are making.
Now, just a few hours ago, talking about governments, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu met with representatives of the kidnapped families and promised them to exercise and exhaust every possibility to bring them home. How much trust do you put in the Prime Minister's commitment?
Netanyahu is probably the most professional politician in Israel by far. And right now, he's the guy in charge, and I have to put my trust in him. There's really no other alternative at the moment. I want to see actions. because so far we have heard the government speak about taking care of the hostages, that it's top priority. And we've heard President Biden be very firm about this, and Prime Minister Sunak be very firm about this. But so far, at least on the surface, we haven't seen any progress. We haven't seen the Red Cross visiting them. We haven't seen any news about their whereabouts. And not only that, last night was the hardest attack on Gaza so far, with the stated goal of starting to destroy the tunnels. They're using bunker penetrating bombs, and this is exactly a part of the mission to destroy the Hamas infrastructure, which is great. But as long as the hostages are being held there, how do they know that none of these tunnels is where the hostages are? Because the hostages that have been released explicitly said, we were held in tunnels. So how do they know that last night's strike didn't kill one of the hostages?
Now, what should the world know? I think you've said a lot. And what is your appeal? Because as you said, we don't know whether these airstrikes are harming hostages or worsening situations. At some point, somebody has to put both the civilians in Gaza and the civilians in Israel that were killed and the hostages as the priority before we deal with hard lines on either side. What, Yudi, are you saying to the world about your cousin and those that are being held with him?
Reverend, you've made an excellent moral point. There is no difference between blood of a Palestinian and the blood of an Israeli. And this is why the call should be the same. It doesn't matter if your position is that you're pro-Palestinian, if your position is that you're pro-Israeli, your interest must be the same. Stop the war. Stop the killing, save people's lives, because human lives matter. A Gazan life is no better than mine, and my life is no better than theirs. And if there are 200 hostages that we can still save, 200 tragedies that can be spared from these families, we have to do everything in our power to do so. And if we can stop the bombing and get humanitarian aid and stop this crisis and stop Gazan civilians from dying, and then go rationally into this situation, the call must be equal. Stop the war, stop the killing, save human lives.
Thank you so much for being with us, Yudi Gorin, and we all pray for the safe return of your cousin and the other hostages and the civilians on all sides.